Hello everyone and welcome back. In this lecture we'll continue our discussion on time zones and we'll specifically look at what is known as ambiguous times. We'll see how to handle ambiguous times. I'll start by creating a time series object by using a method known as datetime_index. Okay, and I'll save our result in a variable called time. So pd.datetime_index, that's the name of the method, datetime_index, and then we'll pass a list of timestamps. So for our first list, I'll pass November 6, 2011. Okay, and for the timestamp, let's start with 000000. So I'll show you why I'm specifically using this date, November 6, 2011. So there was a daylight saving during that time. So what I will do is I'll copy this and then have some more timestamps in the same list. Okay, for the second list element, let's say November 6, 2011, and I'll change the time to 1 o'clock. And for our third timestamp, let's use same November 6, 2011, and then I'll use the same timestamp, 1 o'clock for 1 a.m. And let's go to a new line and add 2 more timestamps. So we have 1 a.m. Now let's use 2 o'clock and then 3 o'clock. Okay, so I have midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 3 o'clock. So this is to reflect daylight saving. Now if I call my time object, we see that there is a time series object. It starts from November 6, 2011 at 00 midnight. Then we have 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 3 o'clock. What we'll do next is try to assign a time zone to our time object. Previously we have seen the tz localize method. So if we already have a timestamp object, we can use the tz localize method, right? So we'll call the tz localize method on our timestamp object. And let's use a US central for our time zone, okay? US central. So what do you think will happen if I run the cell? So when we run the cell, we'll get an error which is known as an ambiguous time error. Let me run it and show you. So it says we have an ambiguous time error. And if you scroll down here, it says ambiguous time error cannot infer DST time from timestamp 2011 November 6 at 1 o'clock. Try using the ambiguous argument. So the method is confused by this time, right? So we have 1 a.m., 1 a.m. right? Panda doesn't know what's going on. So the tz localize method got confused because of this, right? That's why we are getting this error. But it's also giving us a solution. Here it's suggesting to use an argument known as ambiguous. Okay, so this is an example of an ambiguous time error, and when we run into such kind of error, we can use the ambiguous argument and set it to be equal to infer. So what we'll do next is pass the ambiguous argument to our tz localize method and set it to be equal to infer. And let's save this in another variable, let's say time tz for time zone. Okay, now if I run the cell, I don't get an error anymore. And let's call our time tz object. So now we have a date time index object, right? We no longer have this error. And in our date time index object, we see that the time zone changed from -5 to -6, right? So our time zone goes from -5 to -6. That's because of daylight saving. Now that we have assigned a time zone to our time data type, the next thing we can do is use the UTC time zone to deal with this daylight saving. So now we can simply pass a UTC time zone, right, to deal with our daylight saving. So if I call my time tz object and then remember the other method besides tz localize, yes, tz convert method, we can call the tz convert method since we already have a time zone assigned to our timestamp object. So we'll call the tz convert method and then pass the UTC time zone. So pass UTC, and let's save this again in the same variable tz. We are assigning a new value, and then now if we call our tz datetime object, we see that we no longer have the daylight saving problem, right? Now it goes from you see here 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9 o'clock, and the time zone still remains the same, 0 0 0 0 0 0 throughout. Okay, so that's one thing that you might come across while dealing with time zones and daylight saving. You might come across what is known as ambiguous time, and there are ways to deal with ambiguous times. Just to recap, we use the datetime index method to create a timestamp involving ambiguous times. So there was a daylight saving on November 6, 2011. That's why I repeated 1 a.m. twice. So when we run our time object, we have 1 o'clock twice here, and then we try to assign a time zone by calling the tz localize method, and that ran into what is known as ambiguous time error. The method got confused because of this duplicate time, 1 a.m. 1 a.m. And Panda has a solution for that already, which is assigning a second attribute to our tz localize method, which is ambiguous, and we set that to infer. So you can refer to the Pandas documentation and read more about this ambiguous attribute. They suggest to pass this ambiguous attribute and its value, set the value to be equal to infer. So once we do that, we no longer have the ambiguous time error exception, right? Now here we see that the time zone changed from -5 to -6 because of daylight savings. And to handle this daylight saving, we use the UTC time zone. Since we already have a time zone for our datetime object, we call the tz convert method and assigned the UTC time zone. Now we see that the time flows smoothly from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock and then 7, 8, 9. And if you see the time zone, it's 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 throughout. So these are some methods that we can use to handle different time zones and daylight savings. Thank you everyone, and see you at the next